let me turn to you and ask if you can give us kind of the real story, right? Is there a real story? Does anybody know? I mean, what do you think could happen in the next, 48 hours here?
Well, I think, probably two things. One is we will find out how serious these negotiations actually are when the president meets with congressional leaders tomorrow. I mean, right now, I'd say actually it sounds like things are going about as well as one could have expected in the sense that, a week ago, a little bit more than a week ago, the White House was still maintaining the position that they would not negotiate on spending caps or other policy concessions as part of a debt limit increase. And now a week later, we're talking about how long spending caps should last, whether work requirements should be involved, rescinding unused COVID money, and so on. So, I think that will be the first thing, is to sort of see whether all of this negotiation over the last week has actually amounted to very much. And then I think the other thing is we will probably get an update from Secretary Yellen on when the so-called X date actually is. And my guess is that they will keep it in June, maybe explain that it is kind of more of a specific date. I would imagine probably the week of June 5th is what they'll say. But that, could also influence things to the extent that the date changes.
It's in their interest to say that it's coming because they want a deal done. I mean, and it's her prerogative, right? It's her problem if a deal is not made. So she's going to want to put the most pressure on them. But the markets are not putting that pressure on right now. The markets seem to be saying okay, maybe July, maybe August, maybe a deal. I mean, they're very placid, I guess is the word.
Yeah, I can't remember. I mean, I've been following the debt limit stuff for many years, and I can't remember a time when the deadline was this uncertain, this close to the potential deadline. Meaning that, right now, it looks like it could be as early as, I'm not sure there's that much of a risk of June 1st, but certainly early June. But I can also definitely see the scenario where it slips into late July. And that's basically because there's only a few days in early June where they might not be able to make payments. They take in a whole bunch of tax money June 15th, and then they'll probably be okay for a while. And so it's a very unusual deadline. We've never had anything like this that I can remember before in any of the other sort of big debt limit battles.
Right. And I guess people are saving their ammo a little bit because they say, well, if we end up hitting it in July or August, there's no need to fret right now. So it's just a matter of do you think everyone's waiting for the market to tell us? They go, it's hard to figure out, but we assume stocks will sell off 15% if we're suddenly going to hit it, tomorrow or something.
Yeah, my impression just in talking about this with a lot of people in the market is that we're ultimately, not going to see big moves until we get within probably a few days of the deadline. And the only way that changes is if something, really blows up in the near term. But I think more likely, we just see these negotiations go on. Everybody assumes that they'll get a deal, and it'll be, at the last minute in the last few days ahead of whatever the X date turns out to be, that somebody says, the negotiations are off and so on. And then the market really reacts.
Let me ask you about, you probably saw Lawrence Tribe's piece in the New York Times. He was on our network this morning talking about why he's changed his mind and the president can unilaterally raise the debt limit. He said he didn't feel that way during the Obama days, but he feels that way now. Is he removing the impetus for the president to make any concessions on a deal here? I mean, if the base goes, well, wait a minute, this expert says you can just, raise it, using the 14th Amendment. Why would you agree to all of these spending cuts? And why would you throw Republicans a bone? Why would you, the president? I mean, you can see those lines emerging. So is the support for the president doing it unilaterally actually going to undermine his ability to agree to any concessions and come to a deal?
Well, I think, one way to read that is that it is setting up the administration to maybe drive a harder bargain than they would otherwise drive, because it allows them to say, either you do the deal that we want, or we're going to take care of this unilaterally and you can try to stop us. At the same time, though, I would say, if you look at what Secretary Yellen has said about these options, it has not been that enthusiastic. And my sense is that while it sounds good on paper, I'm not even sure it sounds good on paper.
Right.
I think there's a real question as to whether it would be a practical solution because, of course, somebody would challenge it. You know, one of his, I think, points is that it's not clear that people actually have standing to challenge it, but ultimately somebody would challenge it. And how do you auction Treasury securities in the midst of legal proceedings over whether those Treasury securities were actually, you know, issued under U.S. law?